they were here. By 1913, when this photograph was made, New York had become the largest, richest, most crowded city in the New World. Nearly 5 million people pressed onto a few narrow islands at the mouth of the Hudson. From the water, the skyline of Lower Manhattan rose like nothing the world had ever seen before. A man-made mountain range of stone and steel, and still climbing. At night, the city became something else again. The Woolworth Building, the tallest in the world when it opened that very year, burned white against the dark, and the lights of 100,000 windows lay scattered across the river, above the long black arc of the Brooklyn Bridge. The city was being built and rebuilt at a furious pace. Here, the Manhattan Bridge climbs over the East River, its great cables strung into place by men working hundreds of feet above the water, one more crossing for a city that could never seem to have enough of them. The Brooklyn Bridge had come first, finished in 1883 after 14 years of labor and the lives of more than 20 men. For a generation, it was the largest suspension bridge on Earth, and New Yorkers crossed it on foot by the thousands, walking suspended between the two great cities it had joined into one. And still the towers climbed. The Chrysler Building threw up its gleaming steel crown in 1930, the tallest in the world, for 11 months, until the Empire State rose higher still. The whole city seemed to be in a race against itself, reaching for a sky it could never quite touch. By night, the new towers blazed with electric light, a skyline that had not existed in any human lifetime before. To anyone arriving by sea in the dark, it announced without a word that they had reached the very center of the modern world. From above, the scale of it was almost impossible to believe. Every square foot of the island was spoken for, packed tower against tower and ringed all around by the piers and the shipping that made the whole impossible thing possible. Around the edges of Manhattan ran a fringe of wooden piers, hundreds of them, where the ships of the entire world came in. New York was not only a city, it was the busiest harbor on the face of the earth and the front door of a continent. Down in the streets, the city moved. Along Fifth Avenue, electric trolleys and horse-drawn carriages still shared the same pavement in those few short years when the old world and the new one ran along, side by side, before the automobile swept the horses away for good. On a fine spring morning, the avenue filled from end to end, tens of thousands of New Yorkers out walking in their very best clothes, in a city that loved a crowd and a parade and the simple human business of being seen and of seeing everyone else. And it took an army to keep the city alive. Wagons hauled away the endless refuse of 5 million people, escorted through the traffic by the police. The work never stopped, by day or by night, because in a city this size it simply could never be allowed to. The streets fed themselves. On the corners of the Lower East Side, a man sold roasted corn from a cart, one of many thousands of pushcart peddlers whose wares turned the sidewalks of the city into the largest open-air market anywhere in America. Down the middle of 11th Avenue ran the freight trains, so dangerous to the crowds packed around them that the railroad hired men on horseback to ride out ahead of every train, waving a red flag of warning. New Yorkers called them the West Side Cowboys. Most New Yorkers lived crowded together in tenements like these, whole families stacked floor upon floor. In its worst years, the Lower East Side packed more human beings into a single square mile than any other place on the entire planet. On the docks, the longshoremen worked the cargo by hand. The barrels and crates and heavy sacks hauled off the ships on their own backs, 10 and 12 hours at a stretch, hired by the morning and paid for the wages of a single day at a time. At the Fulton Fish Market, the working day began in the dark. The catch of the whole Atlantic coast came in by boat before dawn, was bought and sold by lamplight, and was gone again to the kitchens of the city before most of New York had even risen. Ferries and tugs and great ocean liners crowded the water at every hour of the day. Everything the city ate and wore and burned and built came in across these docks, and so, by the millions, did the people who came to stay. The waterfront had its own police and its own hard rhythm. Pier A stood at the very southern tip of Manhattan, the first thing a ship saw as it came in from the open sea, and the last thing it saw as it went back out. But in the end, the city was built by men. High above the streets, the ironworkers walked the bare steel without ropes and without nets, driving the hot rivets that locked the skeletons of the skyscrapers into place. They called it the most dangerous trade in America, and they were proud of it. And the men who built the city learned to stand together. On Labor Day, the trades marched up the avenues in their tens of thousands. The bricklayers and the teamsters, the dockmen and the garment workers, a whole city of laborers claiming its one day in the sun. But New York was a city of arrivals, gathered in from every country on earth. Germans and Italians, Irish and Jews and Poles, each brought their own language, their own faith, their own music to the streets, and slowly and loudly became something the world had never seen, New Yorkers. And they gathered at the feet of the great green statue out in the harbor, the very first American thing that millions of them had ever laid eyes on, lifting her lamp, as the poet wrote, beside the golden door. And yet, for all its millions, the city could make a single soul feel very small. In the photographer's eye, the people of Wall Street passed like shadows beneath the great blank windows of the banks, tiny dark figures hurrying alone through the deep stone canyons their own hands had built. Some, of course, rode high above the crowd. Here, a mayor, a former president, and one of the richest men in all America share a single open carriage. The powerful of the city, moving through the city streets in the very last years before the motor car changed everything. And the city kept its wonders, too. In Central Park, a keeper tended Hattie, the elephant, one of the marvels that drew New Yorkers up out of the gray streets and into the green heart of the island they had built so densely all around it. And when the long day's work was done, the city played. Out at Coney Island, Luna Park lit 1,000,000 electric bulbs against the night sky, and working people rode the wheels and the rails and the rails and the chutes and forgot, for the price of a nickel, that Monday was coming. In the park, the great city slowed down. Riders took the bridle paths in the cool of the early morning, in the one place on the whole crowded island where a New Yorker could lift his eyes to a little open sky and hear something other than the roar of the streets. And in winter the snow came down and softened even New York. The horse-drawn sleighs came out across the park, and for a day or two the loudest city in all the world went still and quiet, hushed beneath the falling white. It had all come in across this same harbor, the people, the goods, the hopes, the whole restless dream of the place, past the statue that had welcomed the men, and into the city that would remake them, and that they, in their turn, would remake. In time, the hard years came even here. By the 1930s, there were shanties standing in the very shadow of the towers, and men with nothing to do where the great crowds had been. The city went on, as it always had, and always would. But the New York of these photographs, the horses and the pushcarts, the longshoremen and the ironworkers, and the millions who walked these streets, is gone now. Once, on these crowded islands beneath that rising sky, they were here. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Lost and Found Archives and help keep them from being forgotten. New faces from before living memory.